Welcome back to Freedom Fridays. In this episode of Freedom Fridays, we are going to talk about the biblical reasons why I do not celebrate Halloween. I know this can get controversial a bit, but there are some reasons, and we're going to talk about what God says about some of the practices in Halloween. We're going to talk about general biblical principles surrounding this topic. We're going to talk about the question of what about Christian liberty, and then we're going to talk about some final thoughts on this topic. So stick with me as we go through this process. First of all, what does God say about some of the practices that happen during Halloween or have in the past? And if you look at the history, there is a dark history to Halloween. Leviticus chapter 19 and verse 26, "You shall not eat anything with blood, nor practice divination or soothsaying." And also down in verse 31, "Do not turn to mediums or spiritists. Do not seek them out to be defiled by them. I am the Lord your God." Chapter 20 and verse 6, "As for the person who turns to mediums and to spiritists to play the harlot after them, I will also set my face against that person and will cut him off from among his people." And then down in verse 27, he says, "Now a man or a woman who is a medium or a spiritist shall surely be put to death. They shall be stoned with stones. Their guiltiness is upon them." So clearly, at least in the Old Testament law here, that this is something forbidden, and not just by the law, but it says that this is something that's an abomination to God. Deuteronomy 18 verses 9 through 12, "When you enter the land which the Lord your God gives you, you shall not learn to imitate the detestable things of those nations. There shall not be found among you anyone who makes his son or his daughter pass through the fire, one who uses divination, one who practices witchcraft, or one who interprets omens, or a sorcerer, or one who casts a spell, or a medium, or a spiritist, or one who calls up the dead. For whoever does these things is detestable to the Lord. And because of these detestable things, the Lord your God will drive them out before you." So these things are definitely detestable to God. And he goes so far in Isaiah chapter 8, verses 19 and 20 to say, "When they say to you, consult the mediums and the spiritists who whisper and mutter, should not a people consult their God? Should they consult the dead on behalf of the living? To the law and to the testimony. If they do not speak according to this word, it is because they have no dawn." So he's again condemning the use of speaking to the dead or mediums or such, and honestly trying to speak to the dead, because you're not really speaking to the dead. The dead are not in a place where you can speak to them. That's clear by the parable of the rich man and Lazarus. They're actually speaking to demons who participate on the behalf of the dead. And you may be saying, well, what has the result been? 2 Kings chapter 21, verse 6, speaking of Manasseh, King Manasseh from Judah, and he said, "He made his son pass through the fire, practiced witchcraft, and used divination, and dealt with mediums and spiritists. He did much evil in the sight of the Lord, provoking him to anger." So this thing that Manasseh did by consulting the dead and the spiritists and all of that provoked God to anger, and that characterized him as one of the bad kings of Judah, one of the evil kings. And you may be saying, well, that's all Old Testament. Well, there's plenty of places in New Testament, especially in the book of Acts, where it talks about people being cast out of people, or magicians and sorcerers and such, that Paul encountered and Peter encountered. And we come to Revelation 21:8, and it says, "But for the cowardly and unbelieving and abominable and murderers and immoral person and sorcerers and idolaters and all liars, their part will be in the lake that burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death." Now, there are general principles that apply biblically, and I think we can understand that the practices in Halloween are characterized by witchcraft. They're characterized by the dead. They're characterized by evil practices, murder, death, slaying people and cutting them up. And, even though we'll get into the part, where some people, well, I just dress up as Superman or something like that. The general theme of Halloween is not those superheroes. When people decorate for Halloween, how do they decorate? Spiders and skeletons and witches and all of those things that are more connected to the evil side. They don't decorate with superheroes. They don't decorate with other innocuous costumes. They decorate with the evil side. That should tell us especially where Halloween lies. Things like axe murderers, chainsaw murderers, and things like that are how people decorate. So what does the scripture say about those sorts of things, those general principles? In 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 and verses 21 and 22, he says, "But examine everything carefully. Hold fast to that which is good. Abstain from every form of evil." And that word form there could also be translated every appearance of evil. So he's saying, hold fast to what the good is. Well, Halloween doesn't represent the good. It represents the evil. That's why people decorate that way. And so we hold fast to the good, and we abstain from every form of the evil. Again, in Ephesians chapter 5, verse 11, he says, "Do not participate in the unfruitful deeds of darkness, but instead even expose them." So it's not just don't participate, but he commands me to do what I'm doing right now and expose from the scriptures why I don't participate with these things. And we're going to continue to expose those things as we go through this session. In Philippians chapter 4, verse 8, he says, "Finally, brethren, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is right, whatever is pure, lovely, of good repute, if there's any excellence, if there's anything worthy of praise, dwell on these things." Those are not the characteristic things of Halloween. Those are the characteristic things of the Spirit of God that are very different. The characteristics, as we've already talked about, of Halloween are more of hauntings and murders and dead things and such. 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 31. "Whether then you eat or drink or whatever you do," so anything that you do in all of life, he says, "do all to the glory of God." The next general principle is in 2 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse 14. "Do not be bound together with unbelievers, for what partnership have righteousness with lawlessness, or what fellowship has light with darkness? We should not have any fellowship with darkness. And the themes of Halloween are definitely darkness. Matthew chapter 10 and verse 16. Behold, I send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. So what's he going to tell them? You're going into a culture that will tear you apart, like wolves tear apart sheep. So what's his advice? So be shrewd as serpents and innocent as doves. We need to try and be as innocent as possible. We need to get as far away from questionable things and as close to the Lord as possible. So we need to try and avoid those questionable things at all costs. Romans chapter 12 and verse 2 says, and do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may prove what the will of God is, that which is good and acceptable and perfect. We need to have our minds transformed, not conformed. And everything I see about Christians participating in Halloween is conforming us to the image of the world. And then 1 Corinthians chapter 6 and verse 12, all things are lawful for me. Well, you might be saying all things are lawful for me. And we're going to, right after this verse, we're going to get into that section where we're going to talk about what about Christian liberty. And you may be saying, well, all things are lawful for me. I'm not under the law anymore. All things are lawful for me. And he follows that up with the phrase, but not all things are profitable. It may be something you can do, but it does not mean it's something that you should do. All things are lawful for me. And then he follows it up, but I will not be mastered by anything. So what about that question of Christian liberty? Aren't we not under the law anymore, so now we can do these things? And as we're going to take a look in 1 Corinthians chapter 8, all of these things are just decorations. They're not really demons. They're not really a thing, just like an idol is not a thing. Neither is any of these decorations and such. 1 Corinthians chapter 8. Now concerning things sacrificed to idols, which also include the idol worship, we know that we all have knowledge. Knowledge makes arrogant, but love edifies. So now we need to approach this in an attitude of love. If anyone supposes that he knows anything, he is not yet known as he ought to know. But if anyone loves God, he is known by God. Therefore, concerning the eating of things sacrificed to idols, we know that there is no such thing as an idol in the world, and that there is no God but one. Yes, we know greater is he that is in us than he that is in the world. We know that our God is triumphant over the demons. We know that he is the one that is in charge. And so why can't we just celebrate with superheroes and other costumes, dress up as the president or dress up as some other innocuous thing? Why can't we do that? And that's a very similar question to what's here, although a little bit different and nuanced a little bit different, because they were buying the meat from the meat market after it had been sacrificed to the idol, whereas with Halloween, we're actually participating in the practice. So there is a little bit of a difference there. But I think some of the principles here also apply. And if we jump down to verse 10, for if someone sees you who have knowledge dining in an idol's temple, now he's saying, now we're taking it out of the marketplace and we're moving it to the idol's temple. So now this is applicable. Will not his conscience if he is weak, be strengthened to eat things sacrificed to idols? Won't people's conscience, by your participation in Halloween with superheroes and all those other things, won't somebody else be saying, well, they are seeing no problem with Halloween, so I can participate in Halloween how I want, and it's okay now if I get a little bit darker in my costumes and in my decorations and such. And now we're flirting with that line again, when we instead shouldn't be flirting with the line, but we should be trying to get as far away from that line as possible, ideally. Down in chapter 10, again, in verses 20 and 21, he says, no, but I say that the things which the Gentiles sacrifice, they sacrifice to demons and not to God. And I do not want you to become sharers in demons. You cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of demons. You cannot partake of the table of the Lord and the table of demons. This is a direct application here. We are not supposed to be partakers with demons. Yeah, you may try and change the festival, but it stands that this is the day when there are more human sacrifices in this day than any other day of the year, every year. There are more sacrifices to Satan in this day than any other day of the year. Satanists call this a high and holy day of theirs. There's a reason for that. This festival, there's nothing wrong with the day, but it's the festival. Why are we trying to participate in their festival? Ephesians chapter 6, in verse 11, he says, put on the full armor of God so that you will be able to stand firm against the schemes of the devil. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood. It's not against the people going around getting candy and that sort of thing, although that, there's debatable how good that is for you. But our struggle is not against the flesh and blood, but it's against the rulers, the powers, against the world forces of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places. And honestly, they are super active during Halloween. So why in the world would we want to participate in this when this is what we are wrestling against? 1 Peter chapter 5, verses 8 and 9 says, be of sober spirit. Be on the alert. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour, but resist him, firm in your faith, knowing that the same experiences of suffering are being accomplished by your brethren who are in the world. Now, Satan wants to devour us. He wants to take us down. He wants to make us ineffective to the world. The more we look just like the world, the more we don't look different than the world, obviously, right? And if we're not looking any differently to the world, then the world has nothing to be attracted to from us. We need to be putting our relationship with God first, even if it means not participating in the world's festivals. Because Satan is trying to destroy us, destroy our testimony, desensitize us to his things. 2 Corinthians 11:14. No wonder, for even Satan disguises himself as an angel of light. Why do you think Halloween has shifted a bit so that it looks more palatable to people? Because Satan wants you to participate. He wants you to think it's okay and that witches are just these ugly things and such, and it's just all of a fun ha-ha type thing. No, it's very serious. Acts chapter 19, verses 18 and 19. Many of those who had believed kept coming, confessing and disclosing their practices. And many of those who practiced magic brought their books together and began burning them in the sight of everyone. And they counted up the price of them and found it 50,000 pieces of silver. That's a lot of money. And so what was their result? What was the result of them coming to Christ when they had already been participating in these practices? They decided we need to get completely out of it. We need to not gain and sell these things off, but we need to get rid of them, destroy them. 3 John, verse 11, Beloved, do not imitate what is evil, but what is good. The one who does good is of God. The one who does evil has not seen God. John's pretty strong in his statement here. Do not imitate what is evil. Why in the world do we want to imitate the world in their evil practices when we have a God who has saved us from all of those things? Why would we want to flirt with the line again? Here are some final thoughts. 1 John 1:5. This is the message we have heard from him and announced to you, that God is light, and in him there is no darkness at all. So why do we want to flirt with darkness when God is light? Why do you think Halloween practices happen largely and almost completely at night? God is light, and in him there is no darkness at all. Chapter 2 in 1 John, verses 15 through 17. Do not love the world, nor the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes and the boastful pride of life is not from the Father, but is from the world. The world is passing away, and its lusts, but the one who does the will of God lives forever. Don't love the world or try and be accepted by the world in the world's practices. Instead, try and be set apart, sanctified to God. Matthew chapter 5, verse 16. Let your light shine before men in such a way that they may see your good works and glorify your God, your Father who is in heaven. When they look at your life, is it like Daniel, where the only thing that they could come up with to accuse him of is something that was connected to his worship, that he prayed too much? Or is your light dimming because you're looking more like the world? Isaiah chapter 5 and verse 20 says, Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who substitute darkness for light and light for darkness, who substitute bitter for sweet and sweet for bitter. And I think that's what we've done. When we practice with Halloween, we participate in that. We've substituted darkness for light and light for darkness. We've called evil good. And we obviously need to stay away from that. In Galatians chapter 5, beginning in verse 16, he says, But I say, walk by the Spirit, and you will not carry out the desires of the flesh. For the flesh sets its desires against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh. For these are in opposition to one another, so that you may not do the things that you please. So the things of the flesh and the things of the Spirit, the things of the world and the things of the Spirit are opposed to each other. They're opposites. They're not to be put together. If you are led by the Spirit, you are not under the law. Now the deeds of the flesh are evident, which are immorality, impurity, sensuality, idolatry, sorcery, enmities, strife, jealousy, outbursts of anger, disputes, dissensions, factions, envying, drunkenness, carousing, and things like these, of which I forewarn you, just as I have forewarned you, that those who practice such things will not inherit the kingdom of God. But the fruit of the Spirit. Now, as I read through the fruit of the Spirit again, let's think about, do these things characterize our participation in Halloween, or in Halloween in general? Love. I don't think that's anywhere in Halloween. Joy. No, it's quite the opposite. Peace. No, everybody's getting scared. Patience. Kindness. Goodness. Faithfulness. Gentleness. Self-control. Against such things there is no law. Now those who belong to Christ Jesus have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires. If we live by the Spirit, let us also walk by the Spirit. I'm not trying to condemn anyone. I'm trying to encourage you to live and walk by the Spirit. I'll end with 1 Peter chapter 2 and verse 16. He says, act as free men, and do not use your freedom as a covering for evil, but use it as bond slaves of God. We should be instead focusing on our devotion to God instead of using the fact that we are free and that we have liberty as a cover-up for doing evil things. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next week on Freedom Fridays.